The following program is a sports handicapping show. That's right, we will be discussing sports betting and all kinds of other gambling stuff, including game predictions. As you know, not every bet will win, but we do our best. Feel free to use this information at your own risk, and remember, wager wisely, folks.
Broadcasting from the Vegas Video Network studios, live from the Las Vegas Strip, Covers.com presents Vegas SportsDay. And now from the sports betting capital of the world, here are your hosts, Teddy and the Professor.
It's Tuesday in Sin City, and you are watching Vegas SportsDay, the pulse of the sports betting world. I'm your host, Teddy Covers, joined, as always, by my esteemed colleague, the Professor, Dave Malinsky.
Coming up today, we're going to tell you all you need to know about how to find a good dance partner. By the way, guys, some of these wallflowers sitting off to the side can be pretty hot under the right light. We're going to tell you why Little Anthony and the Imperials were singing out of tune in their Garden debut last night. And when we get to the Rose Garden in Portland this evening, we're going to tell you which team is really a rose and which one is just a patch of thorns.
So, Dave, first take for a Tuesday. Lots of good action last night. What do you want to talk about? What's on your mind as we enter Tuesday's action?
Some good action until the final moment of some particular games, but very topical based on what we talked about yesterday. The notion of, are you hot? Are you streaking? Should you increase your wagers? Understand the delicate balance that sports betting brings to the table. Suppose you've got this insight on Villanova. Okay, Wayans and Bell are out. Not only are they two good scorers, which lowers production, but it also means a much slower tempo they're going to have to play at. Much more so than the odds makers adjust for. Think, okay, I want to bet Villanova under. You go out there Saturday night, bet them under, and at the end of regulation, you win your bet by 14 points. So you can write back yesterday. End of regulation, you win your bet by 19 points. Back-to-back games, 14 and 19. You're dead on, but you lose them both because both games ended up in overtime. That can happen. That's part of the inherent risk, of course, in betting, especially when you're betting unders or you're betting underdogs, that overtime factor. But when we talk about the idea of whether you're hot or not, or betting on percentage of bankroll, if you had Villanova under last night, your bankroll is lesser today, which means you're supposed to make smaller bets if you're using that percentage system. Yet you did good yesterday. You had a good handicap. You had good ideas. Should you be pulling back when you were actually right? Just one of these many myriad of little details we have to go through every day as part of the process. I know while I was sweating Villanova, you had the Rockets.
Yeah, I was sweating the Rockets.
That had to be a whole lot of fun, too.
Yeah, they got there. I mean, it was more fun than your wager because my bet cashed. But I want to talk about the Western Conference in the NBA right now because really, I think Oklahoma City is the clear best team in the West. And then we look at the next grouping. I would probably list the Spurs, the Mavs, the Clips, and when healthy, Denver would have to be in that group. Denver, of course, hasn't been healthy in a couple of weeks. So we got about the top 5 teams in the West fairly well fleshed out. But then we look at that next grouping. Who's good? We have the Lakers, we have the Rockets, the Grizzlies, the Blazers, even the T-Wolves and the Jazz still very much in the playoff hunt in that Western Conference. And I found many years in the NBA, these are the type of teams that you make your best money supporting. Not the elite teams in the conference, but that second tier or even that third tier of teams that are good enough to make the playoffs, but not good enough to have a lot of TV games or have a lot of marquee superstars or to make a lot of noise in the betting world. I think Houston might be one of these type of teams. One thing the Rockets have that works very much in their favor for this particular campaign, they have great depth. The starting 5, solid. The reserve 5, solid. 10 different Rockets play at least 15 minutes per game, average 15 minutes per game. They have the depth and size now. They have a strong backcourt. They hit free throws, which was huge for me last night, 9 of 9 at the charity stripe in the fourth quarter. But they hit those free throws to close out games. Houston, just one of these teams I've got my eye on a little bit right now. They have the potential to offer continued point spread value in the weeks and months to come. But enough with the focus on the NBA. Dave, it's time to shift over to Market Watch and talk about college basketball. On yesterday's show, we talked about NCAA tournament futures and why we're more active in this particular market than in other sports, because the trading gets very interesting because there's so many teams for the odds makers to chart, they often fall asleep at the switch. The economic model is also different because we're not tying our money up for nearly as long. Again, we're going to have a national champion in 6 weeks' time, so it's not like you're tying your money up from the beginning of November. Here we are, late February. Time to make these type of wagers. So let's get to work today, Dave. We're going to discuss some major value tickets that you can find in the betting markets right now. The prices we're going to talk about are consensus numbers we put together from several of the major industry leaders, and they're numbers that you should be able to find out there if you care to join us on some of these future wagers. Dave, why don't you start?
Let's start out with Marquette. Right now we find 40-1 available out there. Now, we've done postmortems on Marquette this year, specifically with Buzz Williams saying, you know what, we're not necessarily going to be the best team every time we take the court. I want to be the toughest team when we take the court. That's playing out because this is the first time we can see that these are actually Williams' own recruits out there playing. They're tough, which not only means that they're good and they find ways to win games, but we think particularly as to how you will play in a tournament, those first 2 rounds, when they're stepping outside of the Big East, they're going to out-physical some teams that are not going to be ready for what Marquette's going to bring. Marquette guards you inside the half-court line about as intensely as anybody for the full 40 minutes. They're going to physically wear teams down with that toughness. They're very patient on offense. They're very unselfish. Here's a team that's got a nice confidence, a nice swagger. No surprise if that 40-1 team is still alive past the Sweet 16 and maybe even to the Final Four.
Yeah, and really, the Final Four is what we're looking for out of any of these teams, because once you get to the Final Four, the opportunity to hedge is there, and these bets are being made specifically to be able to lock in a profit should your team make it to the Final Four. And now I've got a little bit of a checklist that I like to use for teams that I think have the potential, or to see if a team is going to have the potential to go a long way in the big dance. I'm looking for inside-outside balance. I want a team with some scorers. I want a team with a strong point guard. And I want a team with the size in the paint to win the rebounding battle. I mean, that's pretty simple. Inside-outside balance, that's something national champions or Final Four teams tend to have. I want the ability to win on the road. You don't get many home games in the NCAA tournament. Teams sometimes will get beneficial locations, beneficial venues, but the reality is that you're going to have to win multiple games in neutral/hostile environments in order to reach that Final Four. And the third thing I'm looking for, NBA caliber talent. If you look at the history of the Final Four, certainly the history of recent national champions, you don't have a couple of NBA draft picks on your roster. Even a team like Butler, there are likely to be issues. So I'm looking for those 3 things. One team I think has that. We kind of teased them on yesterday's show, the Louisville Cardinals. Peyton Siva at the point. He gets the job done. You have Deng and Behrman in the paint. You have the scorers in Kuric and Russ Smith. Louisville, they've spent a good portion of the early part of the season besieged with injuries. Took a long time for Rick Pitino to get his rotation together. It's together now. I think the Cardinals live in that 25-1 range.
Let's go now to a team I believe is the single most underrated in all of college basketball. You can find Temple at 150-1. This team brings a lot of the ingredients that Teddy just talked about. You've got an inside presence with Michael Eric on defense. All these veterans around the perimeter, guys like Fernandez, Moore, Hollis Jefferson, they've been through the wars before. Remember, they're just a bounce away from being in the Sweet 16 last year. They lost to a very good San Diego State team in overtime, where they could have advanced way off of the radar screen, but they play solid fundamental basketball, which means a tough matchup in the first round or 2. They will out-execute an opponent that hasn't seen them before, but not a bad matchup against anyone. The shortest guy in their starting 5 is 6'4". They're not going to have a bad matchup where they're overmatched against anyone. Temple at 150, that's extreme value.
Yeah, and I really debated as to which one I was going to use for my second. I thought about using Cal at 100-1, and I still think that Cal, they're live. In that price range, they're definitely live. But I decided to use Florida instead. This is another, like Louisville, a preseason top 10 team, NBA caliber talent, all 5 starters averaging in double figures. You have a coach that kind of called them out and said, hey, you guys got to get your act together. And all of a sudden, boom, we've seen the Gators play some really good basketball over the course of the last week. I don't care how good they were in December or January or even for February. I care how good they're capable of being in March. And again, you've got the point guard situation set with Irving Walker. He's a steady hand at the point. You have the scorers in Boynton and Ball on the perimeter. You have the Pat Young and Eric Murphy and Will You Get in the low post. They have that balance. They have that talent. I think Florida live in that 30-1 range.
So you notice some of the commentaries are talking about toughness, defense, but also playing your best basketball right now. Well, we've got another team that we both agree on. And since we both agree, we thought we'd save them for the post-mortem. So we're going to talk about one more team you can add to that list that brings a lot of those attributes that we've been talking about.
Guys, we do our best to answer emails on just about every show. And getting great questions from you, the viewers. Please keep those questions coming in. SportsDay@covers.com is that email address. Again, SportsDay@covers.com. You can follow us on Twitter @VegasSportsDay. And, of course, get involved in the community, man. There's active threads and discussions going right now. Covers.com/posting forum.
So finally, the debut of little Anthony and the Imperials at Madison Square Garden. And unfortunately, a lot of Knicks fans were going out of their heads. We're going to talk about that after the break. You're watching Vegas Sports Day.
Are you looking for the latest odds, the fastest scores, the most important trends, and the best matchups and stats? Are you looking for the key late-breaking information that can make you a winner? Well, Covers.com has the answer. The world's largest sports betting community gives you a front row seat in the heart of the action, from the opening lines to the final scores. If you want to stay ahead of the game, Covers covers the numbers.
Hi, I'm Chris Phillips from Talk Tales, and you're watching the Vegas Video Network. And if you stop by the studio, our producer Scott's going to buy everybody a drink.
Okay, guys, let's scrub up and get those surgical gowns on. It's time for the post-mortem, where we take you deep inside the game to show you things you should have seen, but probably didn't.
All right. We just talked about 4 teams that we like based on their current future books prices for this year's NCAA tournament. As always, it's a case of seeing teams that we like and also looking at the teams above them, rated higher than they are, as a little bit overrated and potentially with a degree of vulnerability. But we're not done yet talking about teams that are live on the NCAA Future Board. And as you can probably guess by the photo that you just saw on the screen, exactly where we're going next. And that is to Albuquerque, New Mexico, where the Lobos checking in about 50-1 right now on that Future Board. That's a number that reached bottom when New Mexico dropped back-to-back Mountain West games against San Diego State at home and then UNLV on the road about a month ago. And it was a time in which the season could have gotten away from New Mexico, but it didn't. Much has changed since those 2 losses for the Lobos, and it's changed in a way that provides a textbook example as to what you should be looking for when finding, quote-unquote, sleeper value with some of these long shots on the NCAA tournament board.
What's been so interesting about New Mexico, again, we talk about watching these teams to see if they show the right signs. It's actually watching their opponents. Because at the end of the games in this stretch, we've seen a lot of opponents who just had enough. That's it. You win. We'll go home. We'll live to play another day. Even UNLV is tied well into the second half at Albuquerque on Saturday. But when they wore them down, they wore them out. So let's take a look at some of these elements that have made New Mexico so special. Let's break down these last 7 games and look at some of these key categories. First, of course, it's been 7-0 straight up and against the spread, plus 75 rebounds. That's almost a net of plus 11 rebounds per game. They've held the opposition to 34.2% shooting. That would be the best of any team in the country if prorated to a full season. In the second half of those games, they've only allowed 166 points. If you prorate that to a full game, that's 47.4 points per game. In this span, over 7 games, they held their opponents to 21.9 per game below their scoring average. And in the last 6 games, the leading scorer for the other team has been held to 8 points or less. Tells you a lot about defense and about toughness. Tough teams come on while other teams start to wear down. And boy, we love defense in the tournament. That's why we had talked about a team like Marquette earlier. New Mexico will get after you. They will guard you. they do have the commitment, because one of the things you love about defensive teams that are winning, they understand that it works. You buy into the concept. You dive on the floor after those loose balls when you're being rewarded for it. So yeah, put New Mexico as yet one more team under the radar. It's an excellent value in your future book pools right now. And of course, we have to go to Madison Square Garden. How could we not? Carmelo Anthony makes his debut with the Knicks last night. And by the way, if you can't remember back, going out of my head, little Anthony and the Imperials, 1964. Question came up during break. Yeah, most of you weren't born yet. Teddy wasn't born yet.
Nope.
At that point. So how did it play out? Well, it was a clunker. The Knicks trailed by as many as 19, ended up losing 100-92. Anthony himself, pretty ugly. Only shoots 4 for 11 from the field, 3 rebounds in 37 minutes. That's real bad for his position. 6 turnovers in 37 minutes. That's real bad for any position. The Knicks were a -10 when he was on the court. How did Jeremy Lin do? Actually not bad. 21 points, 7 rebounds, 9 assists, and this time only 3 turnovers. He got those turnovers cut way down. So yes, Anthony was out of rhythm. Lin was still okay. The Knicks got waxed. But there's a chance that there could be an overreaction to that scoreboard because so many people were paying attention so carefully. But it's when we break this one down, there is a lot more than meets the eye and possibly could lead to people overreacting a bit.
Yeah, I mean, Lin certainly had a great day on the offensive end of the court. Defensively, he was a step slow, and he ran into a red-hot Deron Williams with an axe to grind and a chip on his shoulder and something to prove last night. And Williams proved that without any question or doubt. Maybe a fitting reminder that he is one of the best point guards in the league, and he particularly relished the chance to prove it in that big-time setting. 38 points, a career-high, 8 triples in the ballgame, and he certainly deserves every bit of credit that the Nets get for that victory. But there's some intriguing numbers when we look deeper inside that New York-New Jersey box score from last night. Let's take a look at the bench numbers from these two teams last night. Look at New Jersey. Anthony Morrow, who's been able to come in and kind of be an instant offense guy at times this season, plus 20 in 29 minutes of action last night. Yohan Petro comes in, and he's a plus 20 in 20 minutes of time. For the Knicks, J.R. Smith, he didn't shoot particularly well in his second game in a Knick uniform, minus 16 in 24 minutes. Jarrett Jeffries didn't play well, minus 22 in 23 minutes of action. And Baron Davis making his Knicks debut. Well, it wasn't pretty for Davis. It hasn't been pretty for Davis anywhere over the course of the last, 10 years of his NBA career. He was minus 12 in just over 9 minutes of playing time. So that's the story for Monday night. Nothing to do with Melo, or not much to do with Melo. Certainly D-Will had a tremendous game. The real story was the bench. The Davis plus-minus numbers, a disaster for a short that stint. Smith 0 of 5 from three-point range in that ballgame. And this could be where Mike D'Antoni is going to face his toughest challenge. Lin and Davis, completely different players in terms of their pace, their ability to penetrate, their ability to push the tempo. I don't know if Davis is a natural fit for New York right now. And the second unit has precious little time to work together. I talked at the Open about how that Rockets bench is playing very, very well right now, a very deep team. The Knicks bench, there's depth, but in terms of chemistry, not much there right now. So there's going to be a natural focus from the national media on the Knicks starters and the front end of that rotation, but the reserve cast may well be where this Knicks season comes down to. If the bench comes together, Knicks could be very, very good. If it does not, we'll see more games like we did last night.
Up next, time to go from review to preview. It's money time as we start to break down the Tuesday NBA board. You're watching Vegas Sports Day.
This is David Ivey from Pub Crawl. It's funny because this is David from. You should just leave it on. Hi, I'm David Ivey from Pub Crawl, and you're watching the Vegas Video Network. And scene.
Livestream is your premier place to watch live events on the web, mobile devices, and connected TVs. See new events daily or broadcast your own at livestream.com. Livestream. Be there.
Okay, guys, it's money time. This edition of Money Time is brought to you by Covers.com. Remember, for all the key information you need in every sport, Covers covers the number. Let's start our discussion tonight in Memphis, Tennessee, where the Philadelphia 76ers bet up from a pick'em to about a -1 in most locations right now. And this is a Grizzlies team. We don't worry about supporting Memphis on the second night of back-to-backs. In fact, we look to support Memphis on the second night of back-to-backs. Yeah, they suffered a tough loss in Houston last night in the game, right to the final seconds. Couldn't hit the big shots down the stretch in order to get over the hump. But we're talking about a team 21-6-1 against the spread on the second night of back-to-backs over the last two seasons. They did it again in their last opportunity at New Jersey, and the Nets came to play in that game. Memphis able to win and cover on the road at New Jersey in that contest. But not just the second night of back-to-backs. Now it's fourth in 5 nights for the Grizzlies, and their bench is short. Really short. At this stage of the campaign, missing several key contributors to last year's surprising playoff team. We're seeing some decent minutes from these Grizzly starters. Rudy Gay went over 40 minutes last night. Mike Conley went over 40 minutes last night. Marc Gasol, 38 minutes last night. And the bench players, Jeremy Pargo was a -14 during his floor time. O.J. Mayo a -12. Quincy Pondexter a -9. They will get the benefit of getting Sam Young back into the lineup and in the rotation this evening, but it's still a bench that's not playing particularly well.
So we can see now that maybe those Memphis trends might not be as meaningful because the bench isn't as strong. Again, a lot of that stretch had Zach Randolph, Darrell Arthur as part of the rotation. They're missing. But can we trust Philadelphia now? A couple of issues. One, of course, we've talked about the Philadelphia schedule early this year that made them look better than they obviously are. But now here's the second part. If you wanted to pinpoint a Philly weakness, who's your go-to guy at the end of a close game? Now, yesterday we talked about the difficulties Portland is having in close game situations. Let's take a look at the 76ers. Sorry. Philadelphia, what we call close encounters, when the line is -4 to +4. 76ers only 4-9 straight up, 4-8-1 against the spread. Now contrast that to all other games where it's 16-3 straight up, 14-5 against the spread. This line is based more on the overall Philadelphia power rating than how they've done when they've been challenged. And again, we can see where the problem is. Tie game, 2 minutes left. Where are you going with the ball? Part of their flow in losing the last 3 games, the offense has been breaking down in these settings. 85.7 points per game. As Teddy mentioned on yesterday's show, they miss Spencer Hawes. Not only can he score down low, but 2.8 assists in 27-36 per game. That's almost 5 assists prorated to 48 minutes. Look at his replacements in that loss at Minnesota the other night. Lavoy Allen, Nikola Vujovic on the court for 36 minutes and 17 seconds, 0 assists.
Yeah, and the Sixers only got to the free throw line 10 times in that loss. But it's kind of one key category here that stands out when we break this game down from a statistical perspective. Philadelphia, number 1 in the NBA at fewest turnovers per game. Just 10.3 turnovers per contest. And we look at the differential between the Sixers and everybody else. It's dramatic. The number 2 team in the NBA at fewest turnovers, that's San Antonio. They turn the ball over 13.5 points per game. So the Sixers, more than 3 turnovers fewer than any other team in the league. That is something that really matters. That being said, the Memphis Grizzlies, what do? Well, their defense forces turnover. They're very quick. They're very active. They deflect passes. They block shots. Tony Allen's always wreaking havoc on the perimeter. 17.7 turnovers forced per game. That's number 1 in the NBA. So we're between a rock and a hard place here. The one team doesn't turn it over. The other team forces a ton of turnovers. The team that wins that battle likely to come up with both the straight-up and point spread win this evening.
Let's go to the Rose Garden in Portland. The Trailblazers, right now a 4-point favorite. Both of these teams played last night. Diametrically opposite results. San Antonio guts out a key win at Utah. What a run this has been. For all those championship rings that Greg Popovich has, the current Spurs streak may be as good a tribute to his coaching as anything. 7-0 on this rodeo trip, 11 straight wins overall. despite Manu Ginobili only being a tiny, tiny contributor at any time through that. Only problem last night, they got extended a little bit for a couple of the key cogs. Tim Duncan, he got out to 37.52. Tony Parker out to 37.35. This is only the second back-to-back they've had to play the whole trip. Those minutes might have taken a little bit of a toll, but we're not even sure that San Antonio is the key part of the equation tonight. Tonight, this game could be all about Portland.
In many ways, it is. I mean, the Blazers took a 3-0 lead last night over the LA Lakers. You watched that first bucket, went, no, I don't know. Let's go out for a little walk or something. Come back, 37-7 LA. That's a 37-4 run after that opening three-pointer for the Blazers. That's not a good basketball game. That's putting it, you just don't go on 37-4 runs against good teams. Not to open up the game. Doesn't happen. Here's a couple of quotes. Here's one from Nicholas Batum, quote, "We showed up with no energy." Gee, really? You look at the second quote. This one from Nate McMillan. "Tonight, we didn't come here ready to play. Kind of felt like we started the All-Star break tonight." Of course, the All-Star break coming following Thursday's games. But how on earth do you not come to play against the Lakers in L.A. On national TV? McMillan chose to chase in that ball game. Again, we talk about San Antonio's minutes. Portland, all their key players played major minutes last night as well. Again, you're down 37-7. Yeah, you have another game tomorrow. McMillan could have kept his guys on the bench. He didn't. He put the starters back in. And they cut the lead to less than 10. Never cut the lead to less than 10, but they cut it to that 11-point final margin of victory. Didn't get him a point spread cover. Didn't make the coach particularly happy, but LaMarcus Aldridge plays more than 38 minutes. Nicholas Batum plays more than 35. Gerald Wallace plays more than 35 as well. More Raymond Felton. We talked about Raymond Felton a lot on this show. Felton last night, they were a minus 13 during his 18 minutes of playing time. And he's one guy who spent the entire fourth quarter on the bench. This is a continuing saga right now in Portland. Ray Felton has lost his mojo, and the Blazers suffering mightily as a result.
If Ray Felton and Baron Davis were playing horse last night, they'd still be playing, probably sitting on maybe an O, maybe an R. When we come back, maybe a little bit more on this game, but a whole lot more on the college basketball board. You're watching Vegas Sports Day.
Traditional media believes that after about 3 minutes, you'll tune out. Most Vegas media companies think if it doesn't jiggle, you won't tune in. At the Vegas Video Network, we think both are wrong. The Vegas Video Network is the first and only live online broadcast network that specializes in insider news and expert views about Vegas. We combine great storytelling with the ability to watch when and where you want on your computer, mobile device, or television. Discover the real Las Vegas. Visit VegasVideoNetwork.com.
Shifting our focus to the college hardwoods, let's go to Columbus, Ohio, where tonight the Ohio State Buckeyes, about a 15-point home favorite against Illinois. The early money today has come in on the Illini, something of a shocker. This is Ohio State coming off a loss against Michigan on Saturday night, playing with revenge for an earlier defeat against Illinois. Ohio State, they've been a top 5 team all year long, and in general, these top-notch teams, boy, you like them off a loss, you like them in revenge settings. Ohio State in both tonight. But, we've actually seen 2 big revenge favorites today. Creighton and Ohio State both get bet down in the betting markets. The money's come the other way. And, I don't know who's putting their money on Illinois right now. This is a team 0-6 straight up, 0-6 against the spread their last 6 ball games, in complete collapse right now. 1-8 straight up and against the spread, including an 80-57 loss at Nebraska on Saturday. And you can't. How do you give up 80 points to Nebraska? You can't. It's really hard to give up 80 points to the Cornhuskers right now. That tells me Illinois is a one-way team. I'm either betting against the Illini or I'm not betting the game. They have quit on their coach. They have quit on their season. And, there's 15-point spread here we got to worry about, but it's a one-way game, Dave. Ohio State or nothing.
We joked a little bit last week about how we had seen the Southern Illinois defense have this outrageous three-point shooting against it. We said, you know what if you didn't play any defense at all? Would the team shoot that well? Look at that 80 Nebraska scored. If you didn't send anybody out on the court, Nebraska doesn't necessarily get to 80. That's an awful, awful offensive team to score that high. But as we always have to do in revenge settings, to understand game 2, you have to go back through game 1. And here's a classic post-mortem type of game. Illinois wins 79-74 as a home dog the first time around. And when you read different media reports leading into today's game, again, it shows that laziness that's out there. We saw so many people say Illinois played their best game of the season when they beat Ohio State earlier. Well, they really didn't. That's where you got to dig through this. Illinois didn't do much of anything in that first game. But boy, Brandon Paul sure did. Let's take a look at that first meeting between these teams this year. Brandon Paul had 43 points on 8 out of 10 from three-point range. How out of character is that? In all other Big Ten games, he's only averaging 16.3. He's only shooting 32.9% from three-point range. Sometimes you'll simply just get a roll of the dice in a basketball game. That's what happened. So if you want to look to Ohio State here, there's nothing to really fear that much about that first loss. The dice rolled awfully well. Brandon Paul, 43 points. All other Illinois players that night, only 36.
The question is, how good is Ohio State right now? And really, in my mind, that's the only question in this ballgame. The Buckeyes have now lost 2 of their last 3. They were held to 48 by Michigan State and to 51 by Michigan. So teams kind of figured out how to defend the Buckeyes a little bit in recent weeks. Now, one of the things we were talking about at the top of the show, looking at the long shot futures in the NCAA tournament, for the upcoming NCAA tournament, and one of the reasons we're looking for long shots, well, number one, you don't get a good price in the favorites, and number two, no question, some of these favorites on the top of the polls right now, and the teams that have the shortest odds to win the tournament, they're a little bit vulnerable. Ohio State may well be one of those type of teams. You know, Jared Sullinger, what's his upside right now? 17.2 points per game, 10.2 rebounds per game last year. So he comes back. Oh, I don't want to go to the NBA just yet. I'm going to come back for another year. What happens this year? Basically the same numbers, 17.5 points per game, 9.2 rebounds. So his rebounding numbers actually down from where they were a season ago. Doesn't look like he is going to be that elite level player. You know, Big Ten teams seem to know fairly well how to handle Sully right now. He's a good player, but the preseason leader when it came to the National Player of the Year, I don't think he's going to win that award in 2012.
Let's go to the Comcast Center in Washington. The road team, Miami, a 2.5-point favorite over Maryland. We talked about Maryland in a postmortem yesterday and this disconnect between Mark Turgeon and the team. Went back to those big comments he had made back in November after a poor showing in Puerto Rico, and the way he just basically took all the starters off the court and all the scholarship reserves off the court at Virginia on Saturday. But here's the problem. You know, so many times you do that to slap your team in the face, to get them to come back and play better. But do you do that when it's your first year with the program? These aren't your players. You didn't recruit them. So they don't necessarily have to respect you yet. We think this may have come a little bit too early, so we have some question marks about Maryland tonight. Instead of them bouncing back with a passion, maybe a little bit of a resentment towards a coach. If you're a senior or a junior, you've been around for a couple of years, you've been to NCAA tournaments, you've won a lot of games, maybe you resent the way that guy's been dumping on you. So now we shift the focus to the Miami part of the equation a little bit. And the first thing that jumps out, similar to the Ohio State-Illinois postmortem, you got to look at that first meeting. Yes, Maryland took the game to overtime before Miami won it, but the Terrapins trailed by 16 with 7 minutes to play. Their rally to tie it was led by Pashon Howard at point guard, 8 assists in 43 minutes. Problem now, Howard's been out for the last 3 games. He won't play again. In those 3 games without him, already a minus 15 in turnover ratio. Not the same Maryland team with him there without him.
Yeah, right now Miami's got to be considered a quote-unquote bubble team. They're sitting at 16-9, but when we look at Miami when they've been healthy, remember this team didn't have Reggie Johnson for the first portion of the season. His stats don't overwhelm you. 11.1 points per game, 7.1 boards. But at 6'10", 280, 285, he's a big presence for the Hurricanes, and they've been a much better team since he came on the floor. You know, you look at the numbers. I mean, the numbers make it very, very clear. Road games, again, can this team win on the road? With Reggie Johnson, 5-2 straight up, 6-1 against the spread. They've covered the number in those 7 road tilts with Johnson by just more than 9 points per game, I should say. Without Reggie Johnson on the highway, well, they went 0-3 straight up, 0-3 against the spread. So again, we're talking about an impact player that hasn't been there for the full season. Miami better right now than their season-long power rating number would show because they've been better since Johnson rejoined the team. Also, tonight they're going to have 6'11" Kenny Kaji, 12.6 points per game, 5.8 boards. He's a bookend with Johnson. He missed the earlier meeting, which helped to allow that Maryland comeback. And boy, we talk about guards that are tough on the road, the veteran leaders that you want in these hostile environments. Miami's backcourt certainly lives up to that billing. Malcolm Grant, Durant Scott have combined for 155 career starts, a very capable duo as they hit the highway this evening.
So you can put some of that Miami in your pockets tonight. It's a good setting for them. They'll have a much better focus than Maryland will. But even better tonight, let's go back to the Rose Garden again. San Antonio +4. Greg Popovich, absolutely on top of his game. Nate McMillan, rumors that his job's in jeopardy. Yeah, who wins the chess match? Keep in mind from something we graphed yesterday for you, Portland in this range, +4 to -4. Now, 2-13 straight up, 2-12-1 against the spread. They have not gotten the job done in close games. Pops knows how to do it. Give us that +4.
That's the Spurs +4 Vegas Sports Day play of the day. And that's going to wrap it up for the Tuesday edition. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day to spend with us. For Malinsky, I'm Savransky. Enjoy the games and good luck.